Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us. And you can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where we have all the interviews, some great guests. And we also actually have power clips, which are kind of the gold, the nuggets that we kind of mine of the full interviews. And so those are there for you as well. I'm really excited about my guest today. Darci Hawxhurst is with me. Darci, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Let me just kind of give a quick little introduction, Darci, on kind of a little bit about your story and what you're doing. But Darci helps children, and I'll just give you your website from the start, and we'll spell her name so we can get that out of the way. It'll also be on your screen. But DarciHawxhurst.com is the website, and that is Darci with an I and then HAWXHURST.com, and it's real solutions for your child's learning. This work that Darci does with children was born out of her own story, which in my opinion is kind of the best kind of work. And Darci and I have something in common, which is we're both parents of a child who had a brain injury at some level. And we both found the folks at Domen International, which is an organization in Philadelphia, a nonprofit that helps brain injured children to grow, to develop, to survive, and in many cases to thrive. So domeninternational.org is their website. That they have helped my family in our situation with our daughter, and they've also been really instrumental in Darci's life as well. So Darci, just kind of start with your own story, kind of where you grew up, and then kind of take us to Haley and kind of that chapter, and we'll start from there.
Sure, I'm happy to share. To be honest with you, much of my life that happened before Haley is not of much interest, except as a contrast point. I think, I was a single young woman in college when I had Haley, and I joke about this when I write in my book. My memoir in progress about this story as well is that I was. My life was full of some complacency, maybe is too strong of a word, but I really didn't have a strong sense of purpose. And so enter, this fiery little Leo baby who came down with spinal meningitis at 12 days old. So, imagine this fussy baby in the middle of the night. I was young, I was a new mother, I had, some really strong instincts, but not a lot of experience. And so when my mother said, take her temperature, and it comes out to like almost 104, I'm like, oh gosh, she's tiny, this tiny little newborn baby with a high fever. So, it all was quite a whirlwind of events that ended up with both of us for a couple of weeks in a hospital, Haley in an incubator full of tubes and wires. Those couple of weeks later, she was diagnosed with just this huge list of labels already, at barely a month old. So it was quite an experience. I mean, we did almost lose her. There was a pretty hairy, scary night with, a tired new nurse on duty who couldn't get an IV changed, and the seizures wouldn't stop, and no one knew what medication to use. It was already too much medication for a baby of this size, and nobody knew what to do. It was it's a dramatic story, and looking back on it from where I am now, I can see the absolute perfection in the gift of that. Everything unfolded in a way that gave us this tremendous gift for Haley to be brain injured. They named all the different places. I remember that moment in a hospital corridor. My parents were there, some friends were there, and a bunch of people in white coats were trying to explain to me, they're using words I had never heard before, talking about all the different places where they had found her brain to be bleeding and all the tests that they had done. And nobody knew at that point what was going to happen. They knew what she was at risk for, but they didn't know what was going to happen. And they told me to take her home and raise her like a normal child. I mean, what does that even mean? You know, how can I even learn to sleep in a dark room again? You know, I had not left her side. And I think that's where, you know, Haley might disagree with me. This is the, you know, two sides to this coin. But one of the gifts of my personality was that I was just tenacious and stubborn. I was too stubborn to leave her side. I wasn't going to the Ronald McDonald House with the other moms to drink coffee. I mean, you know, I was sitting there next to this newborn baby in an incubator, day upon day and night upon night under fluorescent lighting. And, you know, that's just kind of one example of the stubbornness that I carried, because so there we were at home. You know, she's a month old. She's got this big bottle of phenobarbital. She's at risk for seizures and hearing disorders and visual problems and learning problems and motor problems. The list was long. And I felt like it was this ticking time bomb. Like, how was I supposed to know what was going to happen and when? And we knew stimulation would be really important for her, but how and what? So, you know, I raised Haley the best that I could with my family's help. And, you know, she was adorable and fierce and you know, and brain injured, you know, brain injured. So by the time she was 3, she was not keeping up with her peers. We had tried every early intervention. She was wearing glasses and orthotics and taking, I think, 3 or 4 different seizure medicines and having more seizures and having tantrums and not sleeping through the night, you know. So her life was rough, which meant, you know, my life was rough. So I was a hot mess. I was probably, you know, the stories are kind of funny now, but I was a terrible mother. You know, I wasn't patient. You know, here's this child, and we'll talk more about it as we go along, but this child who you take her into a mall or a grocery store, we learned later, you know, she had auditory hypersensitivity. So, but the world doesn't know that. They're just looking at this strung out mother with this screaming child, and we didn't know what to do. So by the time she was 4, I found the Dome and Method program and took that what to do class, and just, you know, our life changed on a dime in that moment, because I thought, okay, there is something we can do. And there is a very clear root cause here. It's in the brain. And I was lucky. I was told my child had, you know, frontal lobe and occipital lobe and temporal lobe damage to her brain. The kids that I work with in my practice may not have had such a dramatic past. You know, they're simply not thriving. They're struggling to learn because their brain's disorganized, and nobody knows why. So we were very lucky in that way. But it was not going to be okay with me. I kept thinking, this can't be my life. This cannot be my child. This is not at all the way I wanted this thing to go. So I cannot settle for this. Some people say to me, oh, you know, because we did. So we spent, when she was 4, I found the program. It's an intensive treatment program. I mean, I had to learn a lot and quickly, right? And apply it. And so this was years. This was years of intense rehabilitation. And my daughter is in the other room right now. She lives at home for college. She is a university student. She's studying entrepreneurship and nutrition science. Yeah, she was at, you know, anatomy lab today, trying to get some extra credit points, and she's doing great. And so that's why it's very important to me to tell this story, because so many kids are going to be left frustrated and struggling. And I remember that life. And I think, you know, people will say to me, oh, the gifts that you have, that you are so hardworking, or, you know, they want to compliment me on the qualities of myself that allowed me to do this work. It was long and hard journey, no doubt. But it's not as hard as what we were living before, or what Haley's life now if we hadn't done it, right? But I love a good compliment, like anybody, but, you know, the truth is, it's a lot of our success I really owe to what I didn't have. And I just didn't have the ability to accept that prognosis for her. I just didn't have the ability to not hope it would be better. So that's what I'm here to tell this story. I mean, my dad would disagree, but I'm not special. Haley's not special. This is something that can be done. And it's a change, it's like a paradigm shift, it's a changing of perspective, I think. And it's, the truth is I believed in my own belief that it was possible more than I believed anything anybody else said that didn't go with that. So
Beautiful.
in a nutshell, then that's our story. It is a story of hope. And I'm passionate about spreading that hope because I believe that I see kids every day. I meet children every day that have a similar state of brain disorganization that my daughter had. And I look wistfully at them, thinking that it could be better.
Yeah.
We can make it better. And that's not to be disrespectful of where they are.
Right.
But we can make it better, right? So
Well,
I think what would they try
there's
if they had that hope? If they knew it was possible, would they try, right?
Yeah. There's so many different questions that just spurs, but I want to start with just kind of for people who are watching who may not know. So you and I have both been back to Philadelphia to see the Domans, and with a lot of questions and not a lot of clarity at the beginning. And then what happens is you mentioned the course. So there's a course that you take as a new person back there, a new person who's involved with the Doman method, the Doman family and the Doman method. And it's a course that basically teaches you about the brain, how it works, how, what happens when there are certain injuries, and then most of all, what you can do. And so I want to say that as a starting point, because it was really amazing for us to learn about that. And I'm sure it was for you too, because you go from you're given all these diagnoses, you're given all these, problems that you don't know how to solve. And then the Domans start to teach you about what you can do. And from that standpoint, and I think I'm very much like you, just hearing you talk. We're doers. Tell me what to do. Tell my wife what to do, and we'll do it.
Right.
The problem is when we didn't know what to do. And so they give you a program, you go home and you do it. And in your case, what I was reading about Haley and what she's doing now as a college student at Indiana University is mind-boggling to me from where you started. So I do want to say, good job, Mom. I know you're not looking but it's amazing what you've done, and it's amazing what's happened here. But I want to focus on one term you used, and I'd like you to describe this a little bit more, because frankly, you're in this work as well. And so it's great that you're not only a mom, but you're an expert. But you use the term disorganization. And I think sometimes somebody who's watching this, let's pretend, and we're not pretending, but let's say we're talking to a family with a newborn right now, a family that just got home from the hospital or has been home from the hospital for a year or 2 years. And like you and like me, we had children that were not developing anywhere close to on time. And so you're kind of just looking at the child and you're kind of going, I had never heard the term disorganization. I had heard brain damaged. I don't even know if I'd heard brain injured, frankly, but I'd heard brain damaged. I had heard a lot of other terms that are terrible, but I had not been familiar with the disorganization part. Talk about that and how the brain injury, whether it's meningitis in your case, stroke in our case, causes the disorganization that is something that can be fixed, which obviously you've done. So walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. I hope I can do it justice in just a few minutes here. And you'll see that word disorganization or organization, a program of neurological organization in the Doman method work. You'll see it, on my website as well, because it doesn't matter whether it's labels like cerebral palsy. That would be extreme disorganization, meaning the neurons let me back up for a minute. Let me just explain for people who may not have the background that we have what neurons are. So they're tiny little cells that have, they are, I like to call them a metaphor, the fire bucket brigade, because neurons will pass a message to each other without actually ever touching each other. Okay. And everything that we do physically, everything that we're able to do intellectually or cognitively is a result of good coordination or organization of a long chain of neurons passing messages like a fire bucket brigade, like tossing those buckets to each other, not spilling water, getting it where it needs to go. And so every movement that we make is, through these impulses, these electrical impulses from cell to cell to cell to cell, to the muscles and back to the brain, or from parts of the brain to itself. So when those neurons can communicate with each other in a swift and efficient and organized way, then life is pretty good, right? So the process of growth for children from a baby in utero, from those cluster of first cells, for goodness sakes, but it's all about this growth and connection of networks, of neuronal networks. So if those are organized, if they're working well together, if they know what to do and when to do it, and they continue to grow in their abilities, then we have neurological organization. And that can lead us, let's use mobility as an example, that can lead us from not being able to move much at all, except by reflex, to being able to coordinate our movements, to being able to coordinate them to propel us forward, to eventually push up and go gravity free, to eventually walk and run and kick a ball and do all kinds of, beautiful things that human beings do with their bodies when they're neurologically organized. That's kind of an obvious example on the surface. And if that's not going well, that's pretty obvious, right? Kids who get stuck because of a brain injury. And yeah, what's the difference between injury and damage? I write about this a lot on my blog. If I sprain my ankle, that's an injury. We expect it to get better, right? If I cut my finger, that's an injury. We expect it to get better. We talk about brain damage. Oh, feels very permanent, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The way we label things has everything to do with what we believe about them, and then what we do.
Great point.
So, right? But this neurological organization is pretty obvious, like on those physical mobility issues. But, the kids that I work with, and I was telling you before we started the tape, my daughter had some physical problems as well. But we addressed a lot of those and she improved. She kind of got stuck at this stage of development where she had some cognitive disabilities. And, there are kids out there who it's not as obvious that they're disorganized in parts of their brain that have to do with learning and reading. That stuff all starts with being able to see. Our visual development follows a certain order, and our auditory, being able to hear and understand, that follows a certain order. And if something has happened because of a physical injury, kids drown and fall off bicycles, and things happen to hurt their brains. Things happen chemically as well. We are watching. It's been predicted that in the next decade, at least 1 in 3 children will have autism, some form of autism. That's sensory pathway disorganization. And we know that you can look at the pictures and the graphs. It's a pretty clear story. When we started polluting our food and spraying it with Roundup, I think Roundup's changing their name now because they know they're in trouble. They've just been sold, and glyphosate has a new name, so they can use it somewhere else. But so there are lots of ways to impact the brain and what it should be able to do. It's no longer able to do. So that is disorganization. Those neurons aren't working the way they should, but we can change that, right, Dean?
Right. Amen. That's for sure. And I want to just again clarify for someone. So and I'll just use my daughter as an example for a second. So Ella Claire is her name. She had a stroke in the womb. It was affected the midbrain especially, and so mobility was a huge challenge. So in Ella Claire's case, you put her on the floor on her stomach, and if she was a well child without that brain injury, she would start to move around and then eventually start to crawl and creep and stand and walk and run. And that would happen naturally. I mean,
Right.
and pretty much you put them on their stomach and that happens. Ella Claire, we could have put her on her stomach from now until kingdom come, and it wasn't going to happen. She needed the stimulation. She needed stimulation with repetition, with frequency and intensity and duration, in order to help her do things that a normal, well child without that brain injury would do. And so in your case, you with meningitis had certain effects. There was certain injury that occurred, and you were able, through a program that was given to you by the Domans, in this case, the Domans gave you a program that you were able to execute that in essence helped her do things she never would have done. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here.
It is. And I love, you say that she never would have done. And, there are some people that say, well, how would you know? And there are a lot of people say, oh, they outgrow it. Well, they don't outgrow it if you don't help them outgrow it. I mean, they don't outgrow it if you lock them in a closet. We know on the other end, you can deprive children of enough stimulation and opportunity to reduce.
Right. Can I jump in with a quote from the great Glenn Doman real quick? Because you say that, it makes me laugh, because Glenn Doman, I don't know if you remember this, but in his office, he had a stained glass, and it said, I think it was in a different language, but what it said was, because of that kind of criticism they would get, his stained glass window said, "This is the place where things that would have happened anyways happen." Basically poking fun at the idea that the truth is the things wouldn't have happened anyways. I know that for a fact because I watched my daughter develop for the first 2.5 years, and I've watched her develop for the last 17 years. And it's a very different thing. The first 2 versus the last 17. I'm sure you could concur with your first 3 or whatever it was versus the last 24. We've seen it. We've seen the before and after, I guess, if you will.
Yes. And the other thing, this is difficult for me to say. The other comparison I have, which I wish I didn't have, to be honest with you, is with her peers. Those kids that were in physical therapy with her, they're not bike riding and doing gymnastics now. They're not at university.
Wow. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. My daughter was hurt in the midbrain too, not clearly as significantly as your daughter. So Haley had some physical coordination problems, but she was mobile. She was mobile and hyperactive, and rather than immobile. But yes, so it just all depends on which part of the brain, how much, and then what kind of opportunity and stimulation is available to get them through those blocks, right? Trillions of neurons waiting to come online. My master's program, we looked at some of this, and of course I study it. I gobble it all up. This idea that, stem cell research is telling us there are new neurons coming all the time, and they hang around waiting for a job. And if they don't get one, well, they disappear again. And so all the neuroscience is telling us what you and I have just experienced, on our living room floors for years. Right?
Yes. And it's amazing to me, just from a big picture perspective, just hearing you talk. I mean, here we have this brain. I believe God created it. It's a miraculous thing. This little, I don't know how much it weighs, but not much.
6 pounds.
How much?
6 pounds.
6 pounds. Okay. This little 6-pound thing that's in, what it does is just absolutely miraculous. And the truth is, from my perspective, we can learn about it, how it works. I mean, just like anything else, we can actually learn how the brain works and how, when it doesn't, what we can do to help it work. Because as Douglas Doman says, we use this real small percentage of our brain. And so to be able to know what to do to help it rewire, things that you know a lot more about than I do, but is spectacular.
Yeah, but you know what gets in the way of that, I think, from a professional, from the other professionals that I know, because I don't think neurologists who, are prescribing phenobarbital, and the drugs have changed now, of course. I don't know all the new names, but, they're not trying. I mean, they take an oath, first do no harm.
Right.
But what's different? There's a different perspective. There's a different view. And I think this happens for families too. I mean, some families embrace this the way you and I did, and some families it just doesn't resonate with. And I've noticed it has a lot to do with how attached we get to those labels. I mean, some people really have a lot of investment in being, an autism mom. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I celebrate that. That is a difficult job. But when we get really attached to those labels, like for ourselves or for our kids, it tends to sort of blind our vision, I think, to what else might be possible. And
Yes.
so I think it's important, because that for me, that label of autism is not a thing that person will be forever. It's a stage of brain development. And do those kids need to be supported? Absolutely. Do we need to have places where the auditory stimulation doesn't drive them bonkers? Absolutely. Does society need to come on board and understand these neurodiverse individuals? And, absolutely. But because that's out of respect for them, right? But I think if we want to take respect all the way, then we have to respect them enough to say, well, let's see if we can fix up some of these problems too.
Right.
Right. So let's see if we can get that brain to not be so sensitive to sounds. And doesn't that really respect that individual, because it allows them to live a life that's pain-free?
Right.
Having auditory sensitivity is a painful way to live. And so instead of just focusing on their behavior or teaching them to potty train or teaching them, if we get their auditory sensitivity fixed up, they're not as terrified of the sounds in the bathroom.
Right. Yes.
So, for me, that's where it is. That's my love and respect for that child and those parents that are doing everything they can for that child and just not understanding, what's in their brain.
You mentioned the auditory pathway, and I know autistic children with autism tend to have that particular sensitivity, and it affects the auditory pathway for some reason. Who knows? But speaking of that, I remember when Ella Claire, we would get on elevators, and it was terrifying for her.
Oh.
I mean, the sensation of moving up and down, she would just panic, right? And so we could have just lived with that. Oh, she's brain injured, Or what happened to us is we did this program with the Doman folks, and which is at domaninternational.org, by the way. And through that program, all of a sudden, I remember we were somewhere and we got on an elevator and she didn't freak out. And I was just like, wait a second. She's supposed to freak out. She didn't freak out. Why? Because the program, we treated the brain. We could have just put up with the symptoms, put up with the elevator problem the rest of our life, which is, I'm sure, was terrifying for her.
Right.
Or we don't have to, I mean, and again, not that nobody bats 1,000, nobody bats 100%, but the point is, I think you're right. I think the labels sometimes can cause us to put up with stuff that we don't have to put up with. And people don't know, I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know there was something we could do, Well, first of all, please give our best to Haley. What a spectacular journey she's been on, you've been on. We're going to put your website up on the screen. We only have a minute here, surprisingly, but I want to put your website on the screen. So parents who are watching this that have, from reading disabilities to, learning disabilities, developmental issues, certainly DarciHawxhurst.com, which is on your screen. Real solutions for your child's learning. I would encourage you to reach out to Darci. On the more kind of severe side, which is kind of where we landed with a major stroke, but domaninternational.org, DOMAN international.org is where they are. So in terms of if you're dealing with a severe brain injury, I would point you to both places. Darci knows what she's talking about, obviously, as a mom and also an expert in this area. So Darci, congrats on what you've accomplished, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. Send us your book when you get it.
Will
Maybe
do.
maybe we'll have you back on.
Oh yeah.
And we'll talk about the book.
Oh yeah, it'd be great. Great fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Say hi to Haley for us, and congratulations on everything that's happened for you guys. It's a beautiful story.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dean.
All right. We'll see you next time. We exist to inspire you, to encourage you, to educate, to empower. Go to goodlifetelevision.org right now. Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you joined us today. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where we have a lot of great interviews, a lot of great people, all walks of life, great stories. Hopefully you'd be inspired, as we have been making the interviews. We've met some great people from all over the country and with from all walks of life. So we think you'll enjoy the interviews at goodlifetelevision.org. You can also find what we call power clips, which are kind of shorter segments from those interviews. So all of that is at goodlifetelevision.org, and you can find us on all the social media platforms as well. I'm really excited about my guest today. Regina Herman is with me. Regina, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So I want to share a little bit about your story, but you grew up in California, and you and I have something in common in that we are parents of a child that's had special needs. And we both found an organization called, a family named Doman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which has, I think, transformed both of our lives in many respects, and certainly affected our precious little ones. And so I wanted to kind of get into the story, what this was like for you, and what's happened since, as you've been on the Doman program. But let's start with just the kind of the birth. I know Jade is your daughter. She's 6.
Yes.
And I know she was born, even though she was small, she was a healthy baby.
Yes. Correct.
So walk us through kind of from her birth and then forward, for the next 2 years after her birth.
So she was born without any complications. She was born healthy, albeit very small, 4 pounds, 5 ounces. But again, no real issues. So as life goes on, she starts developing. She's late in her milestones, and she's diagnosed failure to thrive, and she develops GERD, acid reflux, to an extreme where she is vomiting every day after every feeding all day. So she's having some issues with feeding, and after speaking to our pediatrician, she had just suggested us meeting with a gastroenterologist so we can kind of go from there and see his opinion on things. And we did start her on acid reflux meds at a young age. And at this point, she's about 3 months. And at the same time, she's not lifting her head up when she's on her belly. So we were also referred to start physical therapy. So she did start to see a physical therapist around 4 months of age, and things just never really progressed. With the therapy she was in, with her reflux was getting worse as she was getting older, and one thing led to another, and then we kind of were just going from specialist to specialist. We ended up seeing neurologist. We had to see endocrinologist. We were at doctor's visits all the time, routinely. She wasn't able to gain fast enough, and she wasn't very healthy. So we had a lot of internal issues. And when she got to the age of just before 12 months, so it was around 11 months, the reflux had gotten so bad, she just stopped eating. She didn't want to eat anymore. It didn't feel good to eat. She, at that point, we had transitioned. I was started off breastfeeding, and then at that point we had to transition to formula feeds to help her with the weight gain and supplement. And so with bottle feeding, she just wouldn't take it anymore. It was painful for her. She would scream. It was uncomfortable because it was a feed, and then it was a projectile vomit. It was just a horrible situation. But with that, we had to do an emergency surgery where we had to put a G tube, a feeding tube in her stomach so she could eat, because she wasn't getting the nutrition, because like I said, she didn't want to eat orally anymore. It just wasn't comfortable for her. So we did that. And at the same time, we did something called a Nissen fundoplication surgery, which basically just keeps her from throwing up. Basically, it just keeps her food from coming up. So we did that at the same time, and there were some complications. She was only supposed to be in the hospital for maybe 4 to 5 days at most, but we were in there a lot longer because of complications with the surgery, and then her immune system, and she got very sick. And so she had that surgery when she was about 13 months. And it was just kind of a mess at that point. Once we got out of the hospital, we had already known about the Doman family, and we were planning to do a visit with our daughter. We just needed her to get better and to be able to travel to Pennsylvania. And we lived in California at the time.
So you knew about, how did you know about the Domans? Did you just, somebody introduced them to you, or how did you know?
So it's kind of funny. So my mother-in-law, she went to college in Pennsylvania, and she was studying to be a special education teacher. So she had remembered in one of her classes somebody mentioning about the Doman family and about Glenn. They spoke about Glenn in one of her classes. And so she told me about this book, What to Do About Your Brain and Your Child. So at this point, we exceeded any kind of expectations of my daughter getting better faster, because she was just going downhill at a rapid pace. So, and this is after doctor after doctor after doctor, therapist after therapist. So this was a hope for us. I read the book, and I just called, and I made an appointment and to go see the lecture series with my husband. And I told my husband about it, and I was like, we're doing it. We're getting on a plane. We're going to go. We've tried a lot of other things since, day one of my daughter's birth. It's been a year. She's not getting better. We need some answers, and we weren't getting any answers. So we went for it. He was like, okay, I'm on board. And we jumped on the plane and went to start with the lecture courses.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she's 14 months, he said, and when you were able to get an appointment or so. And so she had been physically kind of going down, dealing with all these different surgeries, different things.
Right.
You get to the course. I've been there. So you're learning about the brain. and you're learning about your child's injury. You're learning about how it
Mhm.
affects, how that specific brain injury is working itself out in the child's life.
Right.
And by the way, I'll give it real quick, domaninternational.org. If you're watching this and you know somebody with a special needs child or a child that's struggling, that's having difficulty, that's not developing or developing slow, for sure, point them towards Doman International, DOMAN international.org. So now take us from you learn all this information. If you're like me, it was kind of a mind-boggling, mind-blowing experience to learn about this.
Absolutely.
You know, it was shocking. I mean, it was amazing. So you have that experience. You get home and you start. I'm assuming you started a program, what they call an intensive program. So
Mhm.
walk us through that. Kind of take us through what you started to do, when, for how long, just in the kind of ensuing years.
Yes, it was mind blowing. It was like somebody had turned on a switch. It was so much information, and they were the only ones who could give us any kind of answers about our daughter. We were, you know, seeing genetics and everyone, and just blood work, so much blood work and nothing. So we were like, let's do it full force. So we get home, and my daughter's still trying to recover from the surgery. She's only 1, so she's still trying to recover. So we just kind of ease into the program.
Yeah.
We start first with nutrition, and then what they call this, a masking program, a breathing enrichment program. And we just start slow and do what we can do at this point. But I think what really made a turnaround was just, for us, was the nutrition. So we took her off the formula, and we started, she still had her G tube. So I did a blended diet, which I basically just went off of their, the nutritionists. When we met with them, we went off of their list of foods and what to take out and what to give my daughter. And so I did a blended diet, and then that actually we saw some changes with just switching out her food and nutrition. And then, so once she was able to recover from her surgery and feel better, and she was on some antibiotics from the surgery. And so once we could get her off the medications and off the reflux meds, we were able to continue with the program. So what we would do is we would go do a revisit every 6 months, so they can reevaluate and reassess my daughter. And but in between that period, we would send them videos and updates and reports. And so we were dedicated to it. We did it every day. We breathe, sleep, everything with this program and this system, because we knew we needed to be consistent. And frequency, duration, intensity is what they preach, and it is very, very much true. So each visit we were going back, our daughter kept progressing, and mobility was huge. So when we started the program, Jade was basically rolling for transportation. She wasn't able to creep or crawl. So after being on the program for, it was about 3 or 4 months, she already started to get up on her hands and knees and start crawling.
Wow.
And that was huge for us, because she hadn't even tried to attempt that at all whatsoever. Probably for most of the time, she just didn't feel good. Her body didn't feel good, or she didn't have the energy to do that. So we would continue to go back. She would keep hitting these milestones. And each time we'd go back, we'd get a new program to come home and do, an intensive treatment program. And it is definitely an intensive home treatment program, but well worth every second of it. And, so, after she started crawling, creeping and crawling, we got her in a stander to work on her kind of being able to stand on her own and pull up to stand. And each new thing we would get, they would train us while we were in Philadelphia. They'd train us on a new program, and we'd come back. And like I said, each time we'd go back, we'd get a victory for our daughter, and just things that we would have probably not necessarily seen if we were continuing to go the route we were going. When we met with a neurologist, when my daughter was 1, he said that she may not walk. And if she was to walk, she would always need some kind of support. So braces, or even if she needed a wheelchair, but something support. She would not be able to walk freely on her own. So lo and behold, when my daughter turned 4, she started walking on her own.
Wow.
And this was huge for us. This was something that me and my husband always knew and could foresee. We knew she was going to be able to do this, get up on her feet and walk. And no matter what anyone told us. And that's how, in the eyes of the Doman family, that was in their eyes too. Like, any child can overcome, and they were there to give us hope when no one else would. So
Wow.
yeah, she, at that point, I mean, like I said, we were going full force, and we never stopped, and we kept going. And now we're seeing, we call them little inch stones, that she's making little progress here and there. She since has gotten her G-tube removed, and she started eating orally, which is huge for her as well. And we were working on speech, but she's starting to say some words, plenty words, which is fantastic. And we can't wait till it keeps coming out. And we're just so excited and motivated by her. She is such a warrior, and she has worked so hard. It is a lot of work, but she does it with a smile, and we have a good time with it. This is what we do. This is what she's known since she was little. So
yeah. Well, and you're still smiling. That's good.
Yeah. Yes. We're very blessed.
Yeah, I agree. So she was diagnosed as cerebral palsy. Is that
right? Right. So it was kind of funny because the doctors kept saying she was a rare case. She was a rare case, and no one could really pinpoint a diagnosis for her. They just could see that she, had a global developmental delay. She was had low muscle tone, failure to thrive. So with that, they labeled her as having cerebral palsy.
Okay. Yeah, it's that can be so frustrating to, well, I mean, there's I think you experience all the gamut of emotions and questions. If you're like me, I mean, you want to know what to do. You're being told, we don't know, we'll wait and see. But then you feel powerless if you just have to wait and see, because is there something we can do, but they don't know what to do because they've never done it. So, I mean, there's just this interesting, and then so to find somebody like you found the Domans and we found the Domans, who has been doing this for 60 or 70 years and has lots of other stories of, oh yeah, we've seen, I mean, to hear the words, oh yeah, we believe she could walk or he could walk. We believe that they could eat. It's such a hopeful thing. And then it ended up happening. So it wasn't false hope. I mean, it wasn't some pie in the sky thing. It was, they actually believe it because they've done it, And we had a very similar story as yours from the standpoint of nutrition. Nutrition was, and I know they say that that's, foundational, but it was a big deal. I mean, we did not deal with the stuff you were dealing with, but her respiration wasn't good. She was constantly having respiratory illnesses and so forth, which, just not breathing well. And I think a lot of it was tied to nutrition. Once we cut out, all that stuff, it's amazing what happened with her health. And then when her health was good, her development got better. So it's like they work
Right.
together, you know, which
Absolutely.
which was a
Yes.
wonderful thing. So it sounds like you had the same experience with nutrition.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and you know,
So
I
we've
wouldn't
stayed on that path.
think,
Nutrition.
yeah, I mean, I guess if before this all happened to us, I would not have thought, okay, if somebody's got a brain injury, that nutrition was that big of a deal, but it really
Mhm.
is.
Yes.
I mean,
It's
was that your experience?
it was yes, it was our experience. And now, even since being with the program and everything that we did with our daughter, I've learned so much from just for myself and my family, and to continue on this this nutrition plan.
Yeah.
We've been so healthier overall. My daughter rarely gets sick.
Yeah.
She's also taking vitamins, supplements as well, but it makes such a huge difference, and you don't really think about it until you actually are in it and you see it and you do it and you see results, and then you're like, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
So
So just to kind of back up a step. So you guys, you get out there at 14, 15 months. She's not doing well. She's not keeping food down. She's not developing. She's not able to lift her head on the ground on her
right.
stomach. I mean,
Hmm.
doesn't sound like a good situation to since then. So you're saying she, from not being supposed to be able to walk, she walked at 4. She's now saying words.
Hmm.
Uh, her health has improved dramatically, and she's
Hmm.
hardly ever gets sick. I mean, that's just results. I mean, those are well, I like the term inch stones. That's good. Those are like big. Those are big moments for you guys.
Yes. Yes. Big moments. Like, you really, I mean, I guess you wouldn't think about it, with a neurotypical child. But these milestones, for us, it was literally like Jade is just climbing this mountain, and she's, going to get to the top, but she has obstacles and hurdles and everything thrown in her way. So when she does accomplish something, we like just want to have a party. We want to shout it
Yeah.
from the rooftop. There's tears, there's joy. It's just an overwhelming feeling, for us, but for her, because she works so hard every single day to do this, when all odds are against.
Yes.
She didn't have anything easier laid out for her. It's been a battle and a struggle, but she does it, and she's accomplished some amazing things, and she'll accomplish more,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well, and
it,
we're a few years ahead of you, but we've been so our daughter's 19 now, but it's hilarious. She's
okay.
still doing stuff, and so
Oh, that's awesome.
now on this overhead ladder, to for her walking, and, and
Yeah.
it's funny because, I mean, she is the first one up. She wants to get up early. She's pushing my wife to start earlier every day. I just wish we could start. And then at the end of the day, like yesterday again, she said it. She'll routinely say this at the end of the day. She'll say, "I'm just so proud of myself." she, you know,
Oh,
she just, after a full day, and again, stuff that you and I don't have to
yeah.
do. And she absolutely, and she's willing to say it out loud. I'm proud of myself. I mean, it's great. But these,
Right.
I mean, it's so inspiring it's number one, it's inspiring to see moms like you, but it's also inspiring to see the perseverance that these kids can show on this journey, because you're right, they're like throwing, it's like a baseball player that all they're doing is hitting curveballs. They never see a
Hmm.
fastball. It's nice and easy down the middle.
Right.
They're seeing one curveball after another, and they have to just continue on, and it is inspiring. I was going to ask you, how has the journey been for you? How do you keep going? How does your husband keep going? How do you guys stay? And I know we all have bad days and bad months and maybe bad years, but how have you guys kind of stayed the course and to get her the help she needs?
So for us, a huge motivation is when we see these results. I mean, and it doesn't even have to be anything big. It could be just something as simple as just maybe her balance got a little bit better. Maybe her, just even her vision, she's looking more direct at you. She's just it could be the littlest thing. So just we continue to see these results, and that's just motivation to keep going. Are there hard days? Absolutely. But then we just think, well, it's a hard day, but we just try to get in her, brain, her head, and think at her level, like what she's going through every day when she wakes up. So we just with Jade, she's her spirit, and just the fact that she does what she does every day is motivation enough. Also, we do like to hear the other stories of the other children that are very successful, and of the other families, and following on social media and whatnot. We love to see that, and it's so inspirational, and we want to be that for other families as well, because we believe so much in this program, and our daughter will continue to get better and better, and she will overcome. So it's just, the results and just finding it deep down. I mean, everybody has good days and bad days. But at the end of the day, she's thriving and she's healthy. Things, could be worse. There are other situations that could be worse, and we're just very fortunate, that she is healthy and thriving, and able to get up every day and do what she does, and continue to do the program. And I just wanted to comment on one thing, because you had said your daughter, is very proud of herself. So my daughter, her speech is getting there, but it is very hard for her. So she's saying words here and there, not quite sentences. But the other day we were doing a patterning exercise, and we're always congratulating Jade. We're always saying, good job, Jade, super positive. And so for whatever reason, after this one exercise, none of us said anything. We just kind of sat there and smiled. And then out of nowhere, we hear her say, good job, Jade. The fact that she said that, it was huge. We were just like, oh, it was beautiful. It was, because we're constantly praising her, because she's, worked so hard and does so well. And that moment, the one moment that we didn't, she praised herself. She's very proud of herself. Great.
That is so great. Well, it's beautiful to hear your story. And, we are about results. I mean, as parents, you do want to see results. And, and I know that the Doman folks are about results as well. So I just want to say to anybody who's watching, if you have a special needs child, if you know of a special needs child, or there's one in your family or your friend group, your neighborhood, and special needs brain injury, the broad term brain injury can refer to lots of different diagnoses, from Down syndrome and autism, cerebral palsy, down to learning difficulties and behavioral challenges, and ADD and ADHD and dyslexia. There's kind of a whole range of brain injuries, which, we oftentimes in our culture refer to as special needs. But if you know of someone, I would highly encourage you, I think I can speak for Regina, and we would both encourage you to go to domaninternational.org. They are probably the foremost experts on helping special needs children in the world. And they've been doing it for decades. Some of the most wonderful people you can ever imagine. So they are at Doman, DOMAN, international.org. This is the program that's helped my family immensely, and our daughter Ella Claire. It's helped Regina and her family and their daughter Jade. So we're speaking from experience. We have a couple testimonies here, and we encourage you to check out domaninternational.org. Regina, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and congratulations, and say hi to Jade for us. And we look forward to following you over the years and kind of seeing how this all continues to work out.
Yep. All right.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, we'll see you next time.